Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Future Baseball GM's YouTube channel. Today, we have Nicholas Fichtner on. He is the founder and editor of The Launch Angle, recent graduate, I believe, of Endicott College. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So just a quick start off, can you just kind of, for our listeners, just kind of give us a rundown who you are, kind of what you aspire to be, and we'll take you from there.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I recently graduated from college, majored in finance, minored in economics, had a lot of experience with data analytics over the last 4 or 5 years around data analytics with a baseball context to it. Learned structured query language, the R programming language, and other advanced, coding functions, VBA, Microsoft Excel, things like that. Graduated, of course, and then the launch angle sort of kind of became a bigger site than what I thought it would be. It was founded actually last summer. I was living on my college's campus at the time, and my mentor had told me or advised me to create a portfolio of work to showcase to a greater baseball audience, things like that. So I created the site, got a Twitter account for it, and really throughout the fall into mid-spring, it was sort of kind of, I publish here and there. It wasn't anything that I was, going full force with. It was sort of kind of a side hobby, as it were. And then the pandemic hit. Late March, we transitioned to online classes. All my extracurriculars were gone. I was the student director of analytics for my college's baseball team. I was a resident assistant. I had another job on campus, so I was quite involved. And all that just went away. So between online classes and nothing, I wanted something that had something fulfilling aside from that. And so the launch angle had already existed, and built that site into something a little bit more professional, a little bit more creative, a little bit more in-depth in terms of visibility, content that was being published on there. I also wanted advertisers on there as well. One of my advertisers, Basis, Tom Crone, you should check him out. He's a really great guy. He told me about an employee of his. She also recently graduated college, and she was going to be a intern for USA Baseball, but obviously pandemic sort of kind of said no. And so she was looking for a role to sort of kind of fill the time, still be involved with baseball. And he told me about her, talked to her for an hour, 3 hours, something like that. Her baseball knowledge was awesome. And I hired her right then and there. Kelly Hughes is her name. She's published a couple articles so far. She's awesome. And then I also hired another writer as well, Jordan Ed from Michigan. I'm also great, amazing baseball experience. He worked at Driveline, or currently maybe still works at Driveline. So really expanding the site to have writers, really expanding content. Going to launch a podcast here, hopefully today or maybe next week. It's been an amazing experience. The website has really developed and grown and evolved over the last 3, 4, 5 months. I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great information, for our listeners. And I think during this time, that's a great way to, sort of bring people together that want to see some baseball information that's not necessarily, it's published. So I think that's great. And if you can kind of backtrack for us, you mentioned in college, you worked with the baseball team. Can you kind of go through that process for our listeners of what it's like working at a collegiate level? And how long maybe you worked for them and what you implemented there?
Yeah, so I'll actually talk about 2 different teams I worked for. So part of my school's curriculum is to do a semester-long internship, either in the spring or in the fall. And so last spring, spring of 19, I secured an internship with the Northeastern University baseball program, working with that coaching staff. And so with that, and their Division I, part of the CAA conference, working with Coach Clavin, Coach Puccio, Coach Cobb, Coach Pascarosa, who was there at the time, using data to sort of kind of create strategies and create insights into how we can evaluate and help collegiate players become better. They had some databases already pre-established, and so I was actually able to sort of kind of comb through those and sort of kind of work with the data that was being generated out of out of those platforms. And really working with Coach Glavin in particular, it was sort of kind of, he was open to the idea of analytics. He comes from a traditional baseball background, but again, he was open to the idea. And so we'd always have conversations in his office once, twice a week about, he would challenge what I thought about in terms of data aspect, and I'd challenge him on a traditional baseball aspect, but it was always mutual. We always learned from each other. And it was really very insightful. To pivot back to my collegiate career at my alma mater, I was a statistical analyst for my first 3 years with the baseball team, really sort of kind of working in the background, creating and providing the coaches with data reports, things like that. And then my senior year, I got elevated to student director of analytics, which at the time was a huge thing because I never had something like that before. And I actually had a staff member who was also working with me. I actually helped her before the pandemic hit get an internship with the highest Harbor Hawks down the Cape Cod League, which is the best development league in the country for Division I prospects in baseball. And so she was working with me for the longest time. I actually met her through my mentor, and really sort of kind of was there at every single practice, which means that 6 a.m. practice, coach says you got to be there. 8 a.m. practice, coach says you got to be there. Double headers, got to be there. You have to be at every single game possible that you possibly can. And whether it be, working a late shift one night for another job and into 6 a.m., that grit, that grind that really any analyst should have, because if the players and the coaches are on that type of schedule, then the analyst should be too, particularly in college. So really it was about building relationships, talking with the really great experience and a really great way to expand my knowledge base and my experience.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so being that you started, you worked with Northeastern and also your alma mater, have you used any of the technologies you see in Power 5 conferences may use, or MLB, such as an Edgertronic, a Rapsodo, or a blast motion sensor?
Yeah, so when I actually in Northeastern, they have also an intern down in the Cape Cod Baseball League in the summer of 18. They have TrackMan. They use blast baseball, motion sensors. So really, it's all about familiarizing yourself with the technology that's out now. I know that there's a ton of technology that's being created every single day in baseball, new metrics and things like that. It's really important for analysts to familiarize themselves with that stuff, because if you don't, then you're just going to get left behind. And really, it's everyone in an organization on the baseball side of things that should familiarize themselves with it. Coaches, players obviously are more sophisticated now. Social media basically tells everyone what's new, what's the latest trend, and that context. So really, being an analyst, if you can stay one step ahead, 2 steps ahead on technological advances, I think that will prove to be a positive development in any career success.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm definitely on board with you there. I definitely think it's important for all coaches to know about and players to kind of know the same language. Like there's a new language that comes with the technology. So understanding that and how to apply it on the field is critically important. Is there any specific technology that you like the most, whether it's a Rapsodo or Edgertronic, that you kind of hone your skills on?
Yeah, Rapsodo for me, in real time on an iPad, telecoach velocity, spin rate, movement, knowing that your hitters can maybe, if they can hit that pitch on their staff, then that other hitters on other collegiate programs who are just as good as them, if not better, can also hit those types of pitches. And so, really building that repertoire with Rapsodo, was huge and highly beneficial. I will say, though, too, as an aside, blast baseball motion sensors that, again, for those of your viewers are not familiar, you can put at the ends of baseball bats, and on an iPhone can provide all sorts of batting metrics, exit velocity, launch angle. The movement now in baseball is about player development. Have you read MVP machine or your viewers have read MVP is something that players really, really care about. And it's really about developing their swings. And so if they use that data to develop their swings, they're going to basically hit every single pitch that's given to them and turn into a fly ball and ultimately hit more home runs. And that's sort of kind of the explanation for the home run surge we've seen in the last 4 years of baseball. So really just those two pieces of technology are really beneficial, and people sort of kind of think that it's just there because that stuff, while simple on its surface, really in depth, really powerful, and really can help players develop and become better.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there too. And I actually read the MVP machine, and like as you mentioned, I would suggest our listeners to take a look at that, just because there's so many things that are evolving in our game that some people don't know about. So being able to read more about it and learn is the best thing for us right now.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, is there anything that you have done during quarantine to kind of besides launching your website and now a podcast with the launch angle, but is there something you've done to get better at coding or kind of learn more about the technology that you like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I always find books that are progressive in the game of baseball, from the technological analytics written by Kylie McDaniel, and there's a secondary author. His name escapes me, but it was written by Kylie McDaniel. These value players now, like it's the modern day sort of kind of movement in baseball. It sort of kind of now to sort of kind of create any difference between like future value and like Moneyball, let's say, because Moneyball does the same thing. Players. Future value says we're going to find players. Well, we have the players. We're going to have their make them better. And so really, that's sort of kind of how like your Max Muncy's came along, your Justin Turner came along, your Luke Voits, things like that. So really, they were sort of kind of viewed as, wow, they can really create a lot of exit velocity off the bat. Their swings are pretty good. Launch angles are really good. And then New York and LA respectively said, okay, we're going to make them better. And Turner got a giant contract. Most notably, another pitcher, Rich Hill, got a huge contract extension from LA at the time. Now I know he pitches. I think his curveball and his spin rates were really good, or they developed over time. So really, that's the mirrors as well. The Moneyball movement is effectively, I wouldn't say over, but it's very, very, very outdated. Like, never sort of kind of keep those concepts out of your mind as an aspiring analyst, general manager, president of baseball operations, what have you. But really, we're moving now into a different phase and a different era. We're now in the StatCast era. We're now in the MLB AM era. It's really important for analysts now to not hang on to the Moneyball movement. Obviously, that was a huge, important time in baseball. But right now, shift those philosophies. And this revolution, this era that of baseball we live in now includes everyone, right? So we're talking about coaches, we're talking R&D, things like that, because it's all about making players better.
Yeah.
And
Oh, sorry. You're good.
so really, everyone can get on board with that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And, as you bring up a lot of good points and kind of more on the R&D side and player development. And you brought up contracts. Like, I think the thing is, like, we are seeing guys that maybe weren't considered that like top prospect. But then, they perform in the minor leagues and then they become that prospect. And, what can you take me through kind of your thoughts of, like, we've seen recently Mookie Betts signed like a 13-year, $392 million. You see Mike Trout's contract, you see Bryce Harper, Garrett Cole. What's your take on that? Like, with having these big contracts, does that equate to success? And God forbid something does happen, like, a team is spending a lot of money on a player, just want to hear your thoughts on that.
That's a great question. And I think that a lot of fans get a misconception that if it, like Bryce Harper's contract, for example, is 13 years at $330 million, right? 330 divided by 13, that's what he's making on a per year basis. Not really. Mookie Betts' contract, I before I hopped on the call with you, I saw on Twitter that his contract has deferrals in it. So Los Angeles is going to pay him until he's 52.
Right.
Christian, he's going to get paid well and beyond his playing days are behind him, whenever that may be. Washington is known for having deferrals in their contracts, to Scherzer and, that the first thing that baseball fans need to recognize is that in order to alleviate some level of payroll or the way that teams are going towards, because there's no cap in baseball, so you can just literally, it's literally monopoly money. Like you can just literally even what was it, the Bobby Bonilla contract, right? Like with the Mets, like he's still going to get. And so, I think that that's really where baseball is going with, especially how the managed payroll and all contracts are created equal. I can't stress that enough to baseball fans. I bring up Bryce Harper again. I wrote a piece on this back, I think it was last year. It's called Bryce Harper by the Numbers. And I highlight in there that, yeah, he's getting $330 million. A lot of people considered the season that he put up last year in Philadelphia to be a disappointment, even though his slash line was pretty good. And like he had a decent amount of home runs for them. Like he was, last year's contract, according to Baseball Reference, he got paid over $11 million. Now, the production that he now feels in the game was like 6th or 7th, right? Jason Hayward got more money than him last year, like in that season. So, and Jason Hayward is, although a great defensive player, is not the offensive player that Bryce Harper is in the outfield. Just he isn't. And so the reality is that it's how you look at into the first year, the production matches what you're paying him. Like whatever Philadelphia is paying him, it matches the production. The next 12 years of it, like if you look at how much money he's getting paid, which is like markedly 50% more relative to what he got in 2019, is the back end of those contracts. Yeah, obviously a player is not going to have the production at 39 and what they'll have at 29. It's just what it is. That's across all sports too. So I think that teams now recognize that we need hyper talented players now. And I think Los Angeles said to themselves, you know what, if we have Cody Bellinger and Mookie Betts and we have AJ Pollock out there in the outfield, we have two of the best right fielders in baseball in Cody Bellinger and Mookie Betts. Like that's basically what they have. And so really, and just be an elite offensive team. We know our pitching staff's really good. Dustin May went out there yesterday and went 4 1/3, did rather well. So I think that they're saying we can win now and just bite the bullet at the end. And also with Mookie Betts, he won't play for us, but it alleviates our financial flexibility. And they'll probably do the same thing with Bellinger as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, and I think sometimes even our listeners and I'm sure baseball fans, when they see these contracts, they're like, how are these teams paying these players all this money? But then you bring up a good point of deferrals. So it makes a lot of sense that teams are willing to do that, because that's a large amount of money going to one individual year after year, and due to the pandemic now and teams' revenue losses, like it's something to think about that some of us just don't think about. So that's a really good point. So who's your breakout candidates this year? For MVP, or who's your team that you root for? You're kind of looking at, and to kind of, I guess, a follow up with that is like, are you, as the season goes along, is there any specific research that you're kind of doing that you're planning on launching on your website?
Bay Rays winning the World Series, and I have San Diego being the runner-up. And I don't. I mean, if you look at the top three farm systems in baseball, you think of Tampa Bay, you think of San Diego, and you think of Los Angeles. Same sprint. I even wrote this on my site after the draft was announced for it to be only 5 rounds, or at least maybe an outcome of it. And, when I look at the Tampa Bay Rays, you know how deep they are. Like, it's just not, if they were in a New York or a Los Angeles market, they would get more attention. But they're in depth, they're really talented, they're very good. Hear dogs in the background. My apologies.
It's all right.
And really, what it boils down to is with Charlie Morton up on that, when they made that trade and sent Chris Archer to Pittsburgh for Tyler Glasnow, and I get Austin Meadows. That sort of kind of put them over the top, and I don't think they were expecting that. So really, when you have a young, talented core and you have some veterans in there that are very, very talented, you have a very good farm system. Wander Franco is going to be a stud, right? Yeah. Like, that's going to propel them over. Like, for me personally, if few things go their way, they win that series. And I think they have a good shot against New York. With San Diego, what AJ Preller has done, and from a front office standpoint, with signing guys like Eric Hosmer and Manny Machado, adding veteran players, and Drew Pomeroy numbers really good, combined with Paddock and Quantrill and Lucchesi, and also young players scattered around the infield. Of course, Fernando Tatis Jr., Francisco Mejia is promising. Austin Hedges is the best defensive catcher in the game. Into a World Series that is focused on small markets, depth, really good player development, and analytics that drive both teams in some respects. Tampa Bay more than San Diego, but still is very prominent. So for me, I like the idea of having those two teams in the World Series. They're my picks for the World Series. Tampa Bay is my winner. And I think that having two markets, I know San Diego is a big market, it's in California, but having teams that are not known for not like success, but being a World Series contenders year in, year out, they sort of have to reinvent themselves, right? I think that would be a huge leap for Major League Baseball. Huge. For me, if the White Sox sort of kind of sneak into a postseason appearance, I mean, that shouldn't shock anybody. The White Sox, after missing out on Machado a couple years ago, decided to dump a ton of money into the free agent market this year, and they got like Dallas Keuchel, Yasmani Grandal, players of that caliber and veteran status. They also have Luis Robert, Tim Anderson, Eloy Jimenez is the best fastball hitter in baseball. So when you have a young core of hitters like that, Jose Abreu, I won't leave out. That's a very talented team, and I think that they'll surprise a lot of people. I think that team is very, very talented, and also with Dallas, I think they can make a lot of noise, and I think that they can get into the postseason.
Yeah, no, I'm from New York, and I've grown up a Yankee fan, and it just, it's been a while since they won a World Series. I'm always a fan of like the team I work for, but obviously due to the circumstances, I'm not working for a team right now. But it's, I think like you see all the new changes with, free agent signings, and I do agree with your picks. I think it's definitely a good outlook on it because it's different than what people think it may be. So I think that's great, and I agree with you because like there's these up and coming teams that are they have the top ranked minor league systems, and the farm systems and the analytics, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of years and time and effort that everyone's putting in, as you know. So I think this year we are going to see something different. Like if the Yankees or the Dodgers don't win the World Series, I don't think it's going to be like necessarily a surprise to people because this year is very different. It's 60 games. It's a lot less than a normal season. Mm-hmm. So we can see a lot of sleepers. And now with the expanded playoffs, you're going to see teams in the playoffs that, we haven't seen maybe in years. Like they're talking about maybe the Orioles or like the Tigers or like teams that, are in that rebuilding phase, even making the playoffs, which if we see that, like that would be awesome, because like even from an organizational perspective on their end, like, they didn't expect that to happen, but the way the year has gone and what we have had to face, like it'd be awesome. And so there's many different outlooks on the season, and I think we've got it started, kicked off last night, and it'll be interesting to see like how we go with it, how it goes moving forward. So to sort of wrap things up, you've done a lot in your collegiate days, and you recently graduate. What's kind of next for you? Like what's your goal, your short term and long term, and you could share those with our listeners.
Yes. So short-term goal, is to keep adding on, keep building the website. What I realized is that with baseball, I want to provide people with, the opportunity to expand upon their portfolios. Like, for example, both of my writers, right? And Kelly and Jordan experience basically throughout their time in college. Kelly's a recent college graduate. Jordan's going to graduate in December. When I first talked to him, he sort of kind of said to me, I'm this major, but I worked at Driveline. Like I was part of Prep Baseball Report in Michigan. I was, reading his Twitter headline and reading his LinkedIn. That's huge. And from themselves, from a baseball standpoint, is great. So really short term is to really keep building the R&D department, with a baseball team, college, pro, or otherwise, that the data that they generate themselves can really help improve, their abilities. I wrote a piece today called Designing the Curveball, and it was a short sort of kind of mini study on, it was a regression analysis, essentially kind of correlating curveball spin to WOBAs allowed on curveballs specifically. And for your viewers, WOBA stands for weighted on base average. Basically, the difference between WOBA and OBP is that OBP just accounts for when you reach base. WOBA accounts for how you reach base, and weights them accordingly relative to the rest of the league. And so what I found out was, and to my surprise actually, curveball spin doesn't matter, or at least doesn't correlate well to preventing WOBA on that pitch. So really, when you're talking about pitch design, right, a pitcher shouldn't fixate on designing curveball design that's based on or solely meant to prevent hitters from reaching base, right? Like that shouldn't be the case. Your goal of having curveball spin should be to induce ground balls, create strikeouts, or any other favorable outcomes that you want to have with that pitch. So really giving and providing insight to players, and not only just pitchers, but hitters, and also on defense too. I wrote a couple of articles on how base stealing and base running really doesn't matter now in this century on winning championships. We talked about OAA, outs above average, in the outfield, and how that can be a real huge determinant for how you position your outfielders to be successful on defense. So really, all these things matter now, and they'll matter for the next X amount of years in data analysis in the context of baseball. So if I can go into an R&D department and really provide, my thoughts, my analysis, and just look at data and numbers all day long to help players and help them be successful, and coaches as well, help understand, some coaches are, want to be conduits and sort of kind of learn that numbers analytics component to it. I'd be more than happy to hop in and do something like that.
No, that's great to hear. So we have kind of you and I are definitely similar in our thought process. For me, I'm more like, I want to get into that as well on that side, the R&D stuff, but also be like more on field, more like a development coach role. And that's just kind of my area of interest. But in summary for our listeners, what's one piece of advice that maybe you've heard or someone gave to you that you would like to share with others about kind of making that next step to in the professional baseball industry, that you'd like to share?
So I have a few thoughts on that. So you get, 3-for-1 deal. So really it comes down to your experience. I want to see, like, if I'm looking at a LinkedIn resume, or am I looking at a resume, and like for example, I cycle back to Jordan and Kelly, my writers, is that they were baseball people through and through. Like, they had baseball experience, different steps along the way of their collegiate careers. And I want to see that, for me personally, I want to see that you actually said to yourself, I actually want to be better. I know this isn't enough. I know that I can improve. It's like player development, but really it's like people development, right? Like, it's sort of kind of the same way. And I tell my writers that, if you're stuck with writing something or things like that, well, then no worries, we can work it out together. Like, it's sort of kind of developing their voice in that vehicle of writing and publishing articles. So really, I want to see that you people are a self-starter and are willing to go beyond what they already have to better themselves, and that having that experience. Another thing too, is coding. Structured query language, and MVP Machine states it explicitly in the book. Structured query language is a prerequisite for front office work. Like, you need to know how to build databases. It's just, you have to. There's no excuse. Actually, I'm not a coder myself by trade. Structured query language, I learned through an independent study that I created at my college. And actually, it wasn't as complicated as I thought. It definitely is an elongated process, but really building databases with that platform, and it's open source, by the way, so you don't have to pay for it, is really easy, really manageable, and really provides a step up in the baseball world if you have that on your resume. The same thing with R, right? So like the Sean Layman database, you can download an R through the R and as a package and create amazing visualizations and write code with that. So really the coding piece of it is a big component. So you have experience, you have coding. And then also, same thing with data, the same goes with literature. I mentioned future value. There's a book out there called The Shift. MVP Machine we mentioned. I want people to understand this, is that we're not in Moneyball anymore. And I mentioned this earlier in this podcast. Moneyball is always going to be there for a number of years. People will never forget it. But really, it's about player development now. And if analysts can get behind and understand the data that's being generated from a player development standpoint, and how coaches and scouts are now being brought into that picture, that's huge. So really, it's experience, it's coding, and really familiarizing yourself whenever there's a new book or a new piece of literature that comes out highlighting what's happening in the game right now.
Yeah, no, you you bring up another great point, and I would say the same thing to our listeners as well. When I was in college, I went to Springfield College, Massachusetts. That's my alma mater. And yeah. So, during my time there, similar to you, I had participated in an independent study, but working in R with my sports analytics professor and advisor. And same thing, like you said, I've been reading a lot of books. Like, I've just finished Future Value. I read MVP Machine in the off season. I have a few other books lined up right now. I'm reading right now, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's more of like I've heard about the book through a few people, just kind of going about like the mind and like when you're making decisions, like the fast decisions you should make, and the slow decisions you should make. So, I think it started off with the Orioles front office, the Houston front office when they first began the rebuild in 2012, and then the book landscape across the industry. So I think that's an important part as well. Like, thinking, how do we think about these decisions we make, because they are very important, and they're collaborative decisions, but they're also important to kind of speak about with one another. So, Nick, I want to thank you again for, coming on. I think you taught our listeners a lot today in a short amount of time, and, feel free, if you have any questions for me, and I'm sure, if you're looking for more writers, definitely they should reach out to you, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, people reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter. Follow launchbaseball.org, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We have a Facebook page as well. Happy to promote and read and publish and talk to writers' work, and that are willing to open and think differently about data, player development, and baseball in general.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick, again for coming on, and we look forward to having you on again soon, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it.
I'm Gifting Gope, Major League Baseball player. Please support international baseball by subscribing to CBO TV.